We're back, my boy. Welcome back to the trenches, my friend. It has
I
been
know, it's
it's been
crazy.
quite a while, and I've missed you dearly. We had a hiatus in between seasons. We wrapped up a very successful and prominent season one, but we are back in
For
the cut for
sure.
season two. This is our little tee off just to kind of rekindle the flame a little bit, get back into the flow, get an episode up and out there, or we will be back to our visual component that will follow very
Yep,
shortly as Dan
yep.
is now back on the other side of the world and no
Back
longer
on the other side of the
in
world.
Los Angeles. So, yeah, unfortunately, with everything that happened, we know the devastating fires that occurred in LA. It kind of misplaced us, displaced us for a little bit. We're all over the place. Thank God everything has kind of settled a little bit now. Definitely thoughts and prayers with everybody who was damagingly affected by what happened. It was
Yeah.
horrible. But they've now got that under control. You also were in transit for a couple months between New Zealand, Australia, and Germany. You had some family matters to attend to that most certainly
Yeah.
took priority. But we are back in the flow of things. I'm excited to kick this back up. And here we are. That's me and my brother back in the trenches, man. How are you? How have you
I've
been?
I've fucking missed the shit. I've
Yeah.
missed the fucking offload of thoughts. It's one of those things that before you start, you don't know, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
just like, what could this be? And it's not till you stop it or you take a pause because of a large variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's just, and I've actually genuinely missed it.
Me
And
too,
I had
brother.
it on my list of things to do today, and I was fucking hyped on it.
No,
So
for sure. And then I had
here
dozens
we
of
go.
people hit me up and be like, "Where the fuck is your podcast? Like, what is
And it
going
was
on?"
literally the difference between us being like, look, let's hold another 2 weeks, get the audio and visual sorted, and then we're just like, no, let's just run it.
Yeah, for sure. Get back
Let's
into the
just do
trenches.
it.
And it's been a wild start to the year already.
Yeah.
Happy New Year, first and foremost, but we're
Happy New
already
Year.
into February, which is wild.
It's
Um,
insane.
and things are just moving. I mean, the political climate is intense. I think that we could touch base on where the year is at so far, what our predictions are for the forthcoming year, and then what to expect from the podcast going forward and what our intention is for 2025. So, first and foremost, what I want to get to that is dominating the landscape right now is the political sphere of and climate of where
I
things
agree.
are at.
I think where I'd like to start off on this is we had a very enlightening conversation the other day that when I was in Australia, and it was like pre-fires, and it was just before the election. He'd been elected, but he wasn't in power yet. It was like the
Yeah.
first week or two of January, and
Yeah.
we were talking, and you were just like, "I just feel like my frequency is like off right now,"
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I think revisiting that moment is probably an interesting place to begin here because I think there was this period of time where there was some severe uncertainty in a lot of people's minds, and I think it was affecting how everyone was operating in business, in personal life, and
Yeah.
everything. So I think it's probably worth just ripping back to there, and then we can move it forward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the scope of the world before Trump came into office was definitely uncertainty. Like
Yeah,
people didn't know what agendas were going to take shape, what was going to come forth, and he's come in bulldozing. I don't think
yeah,
anybody he signed more executive orders within the first 10 to 12 days of a presidency ever comparative to any other president
yeah,
that's ever set foot in office. So he definitely came in with an agenda. So that time period before he was coming in, I felt like there was uncertainty in the markets. There was uncertainty most certainly in the crypto space. And yeah, it felt like the frequency was definitely just off, man. Like I was
yeah,
going through a lull period for a minute. You could feel it. You could feel the collective conscious was vibrating low, and there was
yeah,
a lot of, you know, conflicts and certain little incidents that were popping up in the news. There was the unfortunate New Orleans attack with the dude driving through the
yeah,
group of people. There was the Las Vegas Cybertruck explosion. There was just a whole bunch of shit that was going on. And for whatever people may believe in their own mind or whatever it is, like it felt like there was some instigation going on in regards to creating a little turbulence prior to the red
Yeah.
wave that came in and took over.
Yeah. And I think LA felt that more so than anywhere. I think
Yeah.
that there was more push and pull, more tension around that, and I think this is just an interesting time. Like I was talking to my dad about this when I was in New Zealand, and one of the topics that we were addressing was like how nuclear, probably the wrong term to use, but how nuclear everything feels at all
Hmm.
times around politics in this current landscape. It is so much more divided. Like he was like, there was a point in time where no one talked about politics at a dinner table. No one
Hmm.
addressed their standing on
Hmm.
and what they believed in and what they, and people changed their minds and people went from left to right and that was okay. And like
Hmm.
there was a discourse that he felt was taking place,
Hmm.
um, and and it was sort of kept on a very private level. And he said since the opinion overload has stepped in, it's just created this excess of division and
Hmm.
this like bipolar nature of like hard left, hard right, and there's not really much of a conversation happening in the middle.
Hmm.
And I think that's exactly how I feel. I feel like I just go from one conversation where someone is profoundly unhappy to another conversation where someone's profoundly happy. And
Yeah.
it's this, and I think that's kind of exhausting. And I
Yeah.
think that, to use the terminology before of frequency, that's a real thing. Like when you've got this love and anger and this thing that's so divided and there's not really anyone that's sitting in the middle, and the people that are sitting in the middle are just feeling this like crossover of anxiety from both
Hmm.
sides. And I think that frequency is damaging if you are open to feeling it. you
Yeah,
know
for sure.
if you have a level of empathy, I think that frequency is a very damaging um place to be in the crosshairs of. you
Absolutely.
know
And I think recognizing how polarizing that divide actually was, like in previous elections or prior to this whole Trump era, like prior to 2016, it's like you always recognize certain traits of a candidate that you respect or that you believe in. So it's never like, or at least in my lifetime, for me personally, it's never been one or the other. Like there's certain things that you take away from each candidate that you're like, all right, I respect certain policies on this side, but like I'm voting blue or I'm voting red. And
yeah,
I think this time it was legit split down the middle of you're either on the left side of the fence or you're on the right side of the
yeah,
fence. And to be honest with you, I saw some unfortunate fallouts from, I saw personal relationships around me of people who were greatly affected by it. I met with a friend of mine a couple days ago that I hadn't seen in a while, a childhood friend of mine, and he's telling me that he literally hasn't spoken to his father since the election because his wife is like super liberal. His dad voted Trump and they haven't spoken since. Like they didn't see each
yeah,
other for Thanksgiving, the holiday stretch. And it's like,
yeah. That's sad.
that's yeah, that's most certainly a sad one of the sad repercussions of the current climate. But at the same time, it's something that I had posted that I got a lot of reach out for on the day of the election when it was quite obvious really early, comparative to what the media was saying that like Kamala was going to win in a landslide and Trump
Yeah,
dominated most popular votes for a Republican since 1988 and just he like it was a blowout. Like it was an absolute blowout. Like dude was up 35 points in the fourth status, like bringing the bench players.
yeah,
And um when it was pretty obvious early on in the day that it was going to be a clean sweep for Trump, you had Elon tweeting out game set match and kind of doing the victory lap. I posted something that said that is what makes our country, the United States, what makes it beautiful is that the fact that we have the right to vote and choose, and we just have to respect what the majority has spoken and hope for the best. Make sure that you keep yourself grounded in what you do and how you maneuver your life and your actions, and kind of just take it from there. And that stems into something that I wanted to discuss when I was saying that the markets were uncertain And everybody knew that there was certain speculation in regards to being a crypto president, like a pro crypto president.
Yeah.
But I think Trump has come in and overwhelmingly shown his support for a new digital landscape. Like he signed an executive order that said he wants to suspend the implementation of central bank dollars, which is was a major part of many people's conspiracies for wanting to digitalize currency and just implement mass control. And he came in, reversed SEC policies, appointed people who are early seed founders and investors in Solana and Ripple, and has now instituted an executive order for um, a party to understand how they're going to move towards a strategic reserve, including Bitcoin and US based crypto assets. And he sent the market into turmoil in an unexpected manner with the launch of Trump coin. So
Yeah.
Trump came in, launched a coin on Solana called Trump coin, which kind of threw things for a tailspin because it sucked up all the liquidity in the markets from all the other coins. Literally, all the other coins tanked, including Bitcoin, while Trump coin was coming out. It pumped all the way up to near $80. Um, and it was one of those things where in a couple of these crypto groups that I was in, these alpha chats, they sent that thing, that signal for that coin at like 300 million market cap because it launched heavy out the gates. It went up to tens of billions of dollars in market cap. It minted a lot of millionaires. A lot of people made a significant amount of money on that coin. Then the truth of the tokenomics started to come out that the Trump team controlled 80% of the supply.
Um,
So it started to create FUD in the markets because everybody was like, okay, this token lockup only exists for a 3 month period, which you assume that means that they're going to start dumping once that lockup
yeah.
goes away. So the market had tens of billions of dollars of liquidity, fresh liquidity enter the market. So people were investing, retail investors were jumping on board. Immediately within a 48-hour stretch, it was listed on Robinhood, it was listed on Coinbase, like unprecedented motion and movement for a coin that's so early on, so in its infancy. But it's obviously the president of the United States. So what else do you expect?
Yeah.
Then they launched the Melania coin soon after and just tanked everything. They sent these coins into a tailspin, consolidation started to occur, and now we've had a little bit of sideways motion. And the consensus among, crypto connoisseurs is they don't know if it essentially fucked up the trajectory of the bull run that was supposed to happen in 2025. So I think one of my early predictions for the year is that I do think the markets will recover. I think it's actually prolonged the bull run in a way because I think that consolidation is going to occur. The coins are going to check for price action to try and find their new floors and see what it is. But I do think that the markets will recover healthy overall. And I think I'm going to stick to my original prediction that I said last year, where I think by May or June, we're going to see some
Yeah.
pretty parabolic numbers. But it was an unprecedented time for the president of the United States to
I
launch
I
a
think that
fucking meme coin.
it's intense, and I think there's two interesting things. One I read the other day, and to be honest, when I say read, I read it as a fucking crypto fan who didn't even finish the article. But I, I was looking at, so first thing I was looking at, in the first time I've seen in a long time, crypto was mirroring the market. And I think since there's so much institutional investment inside of crypto now, there is like a little bit of a balancing that is starting to take place.
Yeah.
And I imagine as people that are hardcore crypto fans that were like, let's decentralize and remain decentralized and let's allow this to be an alternative to the governmental control that takes place,
Hmm.
that's got to be a little bit of a fucking weird feeling. Like
Absolutely.
you've got what you wanted in legitimacy, but that comes with all the things that you started it to not do. And like when you start looking at like a lot of the conspiracy theories around crypto and who started Bitcoin, and maybe it
Hmm.
was potentially a governmental entity that was generating it as this left of center thing that was going to eventually funnel into becoming the currency of the government. Like
Hmm.
that conspiracy is on a trajectory of potentially coming true, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that that's one interesting thing. And the other interesting thing was this. Did you see the Silk Road
Yeah.
um, thing? So what's that about? There's
So
like
Ross
a pool that the
Ulbricht,
government owns or something.
yeah, so Ross Ulbricht in early 20, I think it was late 2010, early 2011, he launched a platform called Silk Road. And Silk Road was a deep web. You had to go through a Tor network to log on to it. And you could find anything that you wanted on this website, like any
Yeah.
type of drug, literally anything. There was manuals for how to put things together, like bombs device. It was
Yeah.
absolutely insane. And it was essentially the black market of the internet. And it was called Silk Road. And Silk Road is obviously a homage to the ancient trade route,
Yeah.
which is obviously infamous. And the only accepted form of currency was Bitcoin. So this is back when Bitcoin was trading for pennies on the dollar, up to like a dollar tops at the time that Silk Road was around. So people were trading what is now billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars on the platforms to receive what they wanted, right? And it was like a very unique marketplace of essentially like these dealers would have reviews where people would be like, yeah, great product, like awesome drugs, trustworthy, timely shipping, et cetera, and like
Yeah.
they'd send it to you however they would, right? This is from people that I know. I never personally dabbled on the platform myself. Wink, wink. And it was one of those things where Ross Ulbricht was essentially credited as first Bitcoin dev who launched a business with Bitcoin. So the government came down on him heavy. Dread Pirate Roberts was his username at the time. And they tried to tie a bunch of things to him that saying that he had like hitmen that he had hired to like eliminate threats who were trying to expose who he was. The feds ended up coming down on him when he was sitting at a library one day and he was slapped with two consecutive life sentences plus 44 years or 40 plus years, which is just outrageous. He was a first time offender. There was a lot of advocacy for him being released, and the crypto bros, as they call them, they made a huge movement to get him freed. And I think that Trump recognized what prowess that brought to his campaign. So one of his campaign promises was to pardon Ross Ulbricht
Yeah.
as soon as he came into office. So on day 2 or 3 of him being in the Oval Office, he pardoned Ross Ulbricht and he came out. And a fun fact about that is that there was a dormant couple wallets that were tied to Ross Ulbricht's name, which they called dust wallets. So when you like make a transaction in the crypto space, like the little bits of crypto that's left over, like the little bits of crypto that's left
Yeah.
over, they call it the dust in your wallet because it's worth pennies on the dollar. It doesn't really mean anything. You're not going to transact with that. Now, when Bitcoin is worth a dollar, and you're transacting with it
Yeah.
and it's the dust that collects and accumulates in your wallets, it's not that much. It doesn't mean anything. It's pennies on the dollar. But when you look at it 12 years later and you recognize that there's 420 plus Bitcoin in dust that now sit in wallets that are tied to Ross Ulbricht, which in today's value is well north of $50 million, like you recognize how crazy it is. So it's known that these wallets are tied to him. The market is keeping a keen eye on it to see if any motion or movements happen from these wallets. And I think that's going to be a really interesting play out. But that's the Silk Road story. And to touch on the other point that you had in regards to the institutional money that's come in, BlackRock, through their iBit ETF and platform offering, now controls just under 3% of the total Bitcoin supply, 2.7% to be exact. The government, with what they seized, the United States government, from what they seized from Silk Road, they're one of the largest holders of Bitcoin, the US government. They have like tens of thousands of Bitcoin. Um, and it's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, um, where it goes from here. I think market manipulation has definitely come into play. Like there was a massive dump off that occurred in the market yesterday. And if you understand the ebbs and flows of perpetual trading and longing and shorting, which we don't have enough time to get into that. It's something that you have to do
Yeah.
your own research on. Basically, the big
Or we'll do
exchanges
a full single episode on
just on
just
that, right?
blockchain
So the
crypto.
major exchange in the world is this exchange called Binance, and an exchange is where you go and buy, trade, and sell cryptocurrency. And the house always wins, always in gambling. And whatever it is, when you're at a casino, the house always wins. So Binance essentially liquidated a bunch of longs and shorts and profited 2 billion yesterday alone, with over 500 billion in trading volume that they wiped out. So market manipulation has definitely come into play, and it is definitely something that the connoisseurs of the space are paying very close attention to, because institution money has not only entered the market, but they are now in control of the market. So some of the conspiracy theories around that is that they are doing price manipulation to try and lower the cost of Bitcoin,
Yeah.
because Bitcoin moves and every coin thereafter follows it. And good or bad, up or down, Bitcoin goes down, the
Yeah.
rest of the market goes down. Bitcoin goes up, the rest of the market goes up. And essentially, what people believe is occurring is that price manipulation is happening while they acquire as much Bitcoin as they can. Then they're going to
Yeah.
announce the strategic Bitcoin reserve, and that's going to skyrocket the price.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we should definitely do a full deep dive on crypto as
Mm-hmm.
a full discussion, because I think it's going to become a bigger part of everybody's life moving forward.
Yeah.
I think especially when you've got platforms like Coinbase taking the level of control that they are,
Yeah.
and running a business model that, when I was doing stuff with them, they were copping heat for being so strict
Yeah.
on how they moved,
Yeah.
and now they wouldn't have it any other way.
No,
You know,
no, for
like
sure.
it's now they're sitting in the driver's seat. So I think there's definitely a larger conversation around crypto. But one of the things that I think looking back and reflecting on 2024, for me it was so one of the realizations that I've had, and I think it connects with the prediction, is in 2024 we went to a level of speed of information,
Mm-hmm.
um, that has never been seen before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when it comes to TikToks being able to be made at a premium level and sharing news about things in almost real time, in Twitter being the text version of that, or X being the text version of that,
Mm-hmm.
news hits Twitter first, then it hits, TikTok as a visual format, and then it goes to
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, and then it goes to mainstream news, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this funnel of information has got so immediate that it's created this ripple effect. And then what's really shifted in the last year has been people's speed to action
Mm-hmm.
off that information.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when, like, you've got platforms like Robinhood really taking off. You've got platforms that are allowing for retail investors, on scale, to actually impact where things go. And I think I really noticed it at the first month of this year, that narrative matters way more than reality.
Yep.
Like, it just matters. Who the fuck can say it first wins,
Bro, nailed it.
you know?
Nailed it.
And I was thinking why that is. And the reason why it is of what I just said, of like, you've got this shrunk, like before you could get the information, but you'd have to call your fucking hedge fund manager to move the money,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to and then that person's like, just fucking chill. It's
Mm-hmm.
all good.
Yeah.
But now you're sitting there lying in bed at 11 o'clock at night going, do I want to go to bed, or do I want to just move my money off?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what's happening so much. And I think crypto is a perfect example of that, of like, new information comes in, information goes out. And I think, when you look at something like Nvidia,
Mm-hmm.
right? This company has been nothing but upwards trajectory
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning of last year.
Mm-hmm.
it is the reason why Biden survived
Yeah.
that 4-year term.
Yeah.
Because it was his saving grace on the market,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it was a very interesting player. Now, it only took one company to come out,
Mm-hmm.
or one country to
Mm-hmm.
come out and say, we built an AI tool
DeepSeek.
for $6 million.
Yeah, you're talking about DeepSeek. For
And
those
then
who don't know.
DeepSeek comes out and drops this thing, says it costs $6 million. No proof, evidence
Nope.
warranted in that statement,
No.
but fucking crashed the
Yeah.
market.
Yeah. Wiped out 500 billion in market cap from Nvidia in one day, the largest single day drop off in history.
And you're like, again, narrative versus reality.
Yeah. You nailed it.
It
You
only
nailed
took
it with that. It took one tweet essentially is what went viral.
one tweet.
And to summarize for people, DeepSeek announced that they created an open source, which means it's free for anybody to use and replicate and own LLM, a large language model, essentially a rival and competitor to ChatGPT, to make it and put it into layman's terms. And they announced that they essentially did it in 1/10 of the time at 1/100th of the cost. So they did it for 6 million in like a month and a half with like a group of engineers. But the funny thing about that is when you peel back the layers, they have 50,000 NVIDIA GPUs that they use to do this processing. That just wasn't part of the that doesn't make it spicy enough of an article. You know what I mean? So
And if someone can acquire that many GPUs
yeah.
for $6 million,
Yeah.
I don't know who, like, what sexual favors are being thrown around.
100%. Who's getting rubbed
You
under
know?
the table, you know? But
Because,
supposedly it was
all
because
these,
of
all
trade
these GPUs
barriers.
just get sent to Singapore,
Yeah.
and then there is not one data center in Singapore.
No.
So
no.
they would have had to be moved elsewhere. So
100%.
It's wild.
And supposedly because of trade restrictions and tariffs and whatnot, they weren't allowed to expose this information because of exactly what you said. It was definitely some backdoor operation. But you're absolutely right that narrative is more important than anything, even comparative to truth. And I think we're going to see that's one of the definite predictions and strongholds for this year is that narrative is going to run everything. And I think by the end of 2025, I think we will have a clear understanding of who are the dominant players in the space, like who really is going to be the Apple of the next 20 years. And what is interesting is that the United States government on Trump's second day in office, they announced the Stargate project between Larry Ellison and NVIDIA and everything that's going on with a $500 billion commitment to AI infrastructure and growth over the next coming years, which there's a lot of loose holes in that too. Like if you understand the largest infrastructure projects that have ever occurred, like it's up there at the tippy top. And if you recognize, you know, following the money when something doesn't make sense, I always tell you to follow the money. And there's no way that comes to fruition. That's my prediction. There is absolutely no way that $500 billion commitment actually comes to fruition. It may end up being like tens of billions. They may cross 100, but I just don't see it happening. When you recognize the books and who the players are at the table and what they want to commit to it, like they don't even have that type of capital to be able to deploy. So I wholeheartedly don't think that happens.
They shouldn't deploy it.
No.
Like, I think that there's a real issue currently around the burning of money in the AI space. And I think if nothing, let's say this DeepSeek, let's say it cost $1 billion. It's still significantly cheaper than everything OpenAI. And I think the irony here, and I think this is where, so my prediction is OpenAI is not the Apple.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just convinced of it. I look at how they've moved, and they began, their inception was an open source platform.
Yeah, nonprofit.
They were a non-for-profit open source platform. Then they go closed source, right? They flip the business model. They fuck over a bunch of very powerful people.
Mm-hmm.
They flip the business model. And then they go, Sam Altman goes on a media run saying no one can fucking catch us because no one's got the money we've got.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's no point in starting large language model unless you've got the kind of money we've got, and that's not a thing. And then bang,
Yeah.
5 days after he says that, one company comes around, open source,
Mm-hmm.
and eats your lunch.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, it's not. It's very rarely the first that wins.
Yeah.
It's like the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah.
It's like, I think they've come out of the gates very strong. I think they're making amazing products. But right now, out of my AI stack that I use of 6 platforms,
Mm-hmm.
I would say I use OpenAI maybe 10% of the time.
Yeah. Unless they
It's
monopolize
just,
and they come and swallow up the competition.
which I don't think they can necessarily do, because the language around their acquisition of funds is to hold all IP in house.
Got it.
So to then transfer that and to acquire, it doesn't feel aligned with what they stand for.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a big ego hit. Like, this is
For sure.
This is not a good move.
They
This
rushed
is like,
they rushed the O3 mini deployment. Like, they launched it a few days after, even though they were still in beta testing with themselves. Like, OpenAI launched their next iteration to take over GPT-4. And like, it's supposed to be real-time response. They try and give out the demos to show that it beats DeepSeek in every regard of like coding, testing, this and that. But then what's DeepSeek's next move, you know? And for it to have the impact of nuking NVIDIA's price by 18.5% in one day, it gave people a great entry, a great opportunity to buy, because that candle got swallowed right up. A ton of investors came in, bought up that dip. It recovered 9-10% the very next morning. Um, so it's going to be a very interesting and turbulent year in the space of AI. And I think the two dominant news cycles is what's going to carry over from the last quarter of 2024, where it's going to be crypto and AI. And that is going to be at the forefront of the news cycle for the first half of 2025. I wholeheartedly believe that. And it's going to be very interesting to see where it goes. So I'm excited to touch on all these conversations, see what's going. I wholeheartedly think one of the things that we touched on a few of our podcasts last year still reigns true, that I think the Apple run is over. Wholeheartedly, I
yeah,
believe it's over. Investors are starting to bail at a pretty decent clip. I don't think Apple has innovation in the pipeline anymore. Um, their big product launch of last year did not suffice how they thought that it would. It did not translate how they thought that it would. Their iPhone sales are down year over year. And you look at it as like revenue was 124 billion on iPhones comparative to 123 billion in 2021. But if you take inflation data into account and how the dollar has inflated, they're negative from what they were. So Apple sales are declining. They're losing their stronghold. And I'm very, very, very interested to see as who comes forth as the front runner of this space. If you don't believe it's open AI, I'm very curious to see who actually takes that mantle and sits atop of the
well,
throne.
I will make another prediction. Um, Facebook and Meta will have a phone by the end of 2026.
Aha. The iMeta.
They've open sourced all their AI movements. He's had a visual rebrand. The
Yeah.
company's about to go through a visual rebrand.
Yeah.
If I look at him now, black t-shirt, gold chain, MMA,
Yeah.
he's had to transition his brand perspective to a whole new lane. You'll start to see his website will start to go a little bit more Apple-y.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll see Facebook is going to slowly get pushed away as a company and pushed to the side. And I think that's why they've branded Meta as a separate entity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're slowly going to see the progression of that brand get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, and gearing up towards a high price point piece of technology that's running at high margin, high tech, and is very, very heavily connected with sunglasses, with augmented reality, with a lot of that stuff. So
Yeah, that's a great prediction, bro. That's a great prediction. I think that
That's
actually will ring true, and I think they'll beat Apple to that time in that space in the market. And you might be right. That's what
yeah,
that may very well boost Mark Zuckerberg in the next half decade to trillionaire status. Um,
yeah.
I see that coming. That's actually a great prediction, and I think it's a lot of exciting topics for us to touch on. I'm grateful to be parked back at the table with you. I think we're going to have a lot of interesting conversations talking about new health progressions, new frontiers in the landscape, where I really think AI is going to make leaps and bounds in regards to progress is going to be in the biochemistry regard of advancements that we're going to start seeing. There was a story that I saw the other day, to touch on this quickly, where there was a little boy who had gone through a multitude of checkups and health issues for his health issues, where a ton of the top doctors in the country and the world couldn't diagnose what was going on with this little kid. So his mom, through desperate action, ended up going into an AI program, I believe it was ChatGPT, and uploaded the scans, his MRI scans, along with his symptoms. And ChatGPT was able to diagnose it and diagnosed it
Brilliant.
correctly. So when they then took that back to their doctors, they had a holy shit. They had the moment of epiphany where they were like, wow, like this is actually what it was that none of us could see. So I think with the introduction of the concept of mRNA vaccines to target specific cancers based off of people's genetic makeup, and what's going to start happening in the lanes of medical progression and um, discovery, I think my prediction, my final prediction for the episode, is that's going to be the biggest news piece of 2025 by the end of the year. Is I think there's going to be some type of groundbreaking discovery or breakthrough that occurs in the lane of medicine that is going to essentially revolutionize the planet, in the sense of how, like how Ozempic was like the big news of last year, where like people
Yeah,
could just
yeah.
drop an insane amount of weight. I think it's going to be on the other side of the fence, where there's going to be some type of breakthrough that occurs with AI in the lane of medicine that's going to absolutely change the landscape or make us aware of what's to come. And I think it's going to be very exciting. And I think it's going to be the silver lining that we find through all of this. That's my prediction.
I I agree. I have two more. They're very disconnected from each other, um, but I think they're interesting. I think that there is um, going to be a massive push towards nationalism this year.
Hmm.
I think I think countries divide.
Hmm.
I think we move away from this globalist vibe of we all suffer a little bit for the greater good.
Yeah.
I think that didn't work over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Um, and I think nationalism is on the rise,
Absolutely.
for better or for worse.
Yeah, and I think that's
You know,
already in motion. I think Trump is wholeheartedly coming in on bully ball. He is playing hard bully
yeah,
ball. His America First mantra is 100% ringing true, and he's putting his piece on the table, and
yeah.
saying
So,
fuck around and find out,
and I
like
think there's going to be a very interesting. I started reading just to try and understand him a little more. I started reading his book, Art of the Negotiation. I can't remember what it's called now,
mhm.
but it's he's pretty predictable. He comes out like, and he says it in the book. Like if I'm ever negotiating, I have a number of what I want, and then I go almost 3x higher than that, and I
Mhm.
scare the shit out of everyone, and then they get comfortable with the number that I wanted.
Yeah.
And that's what he's doing with the tariffs. That's what he's doing with everything right now. And
Yeah.
I think on the tariffs, an extension of the nationalism prediction. I think what is going to happen, and I think what is underrated on the tariffs, is everybody is looking at that as if everyone's going to continue to buy the existing product for the inflated price.
Yeah.
Tariff at 25%, people are going to still buy that Chinese product at the inflated 25%.
Mhm.
What I think will happen is it's going to be a revival of localized companies.
Mhm.
It's going to be a revival of mum and pop shops. It's going to
Mhm.
be a revival of people that are building products that can't compete with offshore pricing.
Yeah.
And they're going to now be given a shot. There's an
Yeah.
option at the table.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that that's going to be quite pleasant
Yeah.
for a lot of people
Yeah.
around the world.
Yeah.
You know, instead of this narrative being this 25% increase is just going to mean it's handed over to the consumer. No, it's going to hand the consumer the choice
Yeah.
to potentially buy something local.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, maybe it's just me trying to be optimistic about certain
No.
topics, but
No.
I just have a feeling that smaller business could benefit from this situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal of tariffs. Tariffs are meant
100%.
to strengthen localized and domesticated product. And we're already seeing what's happening. Like Trump threatened Colombia, they backed down within 24 hours. They threatened Mexico with the 25% tariffs. They backed down within 48 hours. Ended up deploying 10,000 soldiers, Mexican soldiers, to the border now to restrict fentanyl and illegal immigration that's occurring into the country. Like, I wholeheartedly think that we're going to see a reign of power unlike anything before. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on that prediction that we are going to see the strengthening of localized business, and it goes back to mom and pop shops. It kind of loosens the stranglehold of the Walmarts of the world, which is not a bad thing because we were headed towards a linear progression that was just unsustainable. It was a progress pyramid where ultimately you reach a point where society is just too dependent on certain entities, and if there's cracks in the gap, then it just crumbles. But I think it's going to be very exciting. I think we have some awesome, 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 awesome topics for us to touch on, and I'm so excited to be back at the table. I know this episode was probably more because it was quite engaging, to be honest, for the topics that we're going to be able to touch on. But there's a lot on the landscape for us to talk about. So we're back in the flow of things. We're going to keep it consistent. We'll add our visual component back very shortly once we have this situated. We just wanted to make sure that we reinvigorated it um, for the 4 listeners that we have and the tons of people who actually asked us to get back into it. But I'm excited, brother. It's great to have you back in the flow. I'm always grateful for you being the best co-host in the world and being the man. And I'm looking forward to it, man. 2025 is going to be awesome. It's going to be an exciting year of progress, of self-discovery, of growth, of financial prosperity, all through good health and abundance. And I'm looking forward to it, man. We're back in the mix. Small Talk Sucks is here to stay. Season 2 is underway, and I'm ready to go.
That was an epic shout out. Just fucking wrap it. I love it.
Wrap it
Enjoy.
up. Thank you, peeps. And I will see you with Dan next week. God bless.
Enjoy.